I guess as I bring people on, giving them enough ability to offload those things is one that I've struggled with, and one that I just kind of had to come to a realization, accepting kind of that 20-80 rule of if they can do 20, or if they can't do that 20%, but they can get 80%, it's good enough. And that was kind of dovetailing into that. The weakness building on top of that is waiting too long to hire people to get things done, right? So kind of because I always wanted to do it myself, or thought I could do it myself and had enough hours and get it all done, I didn't need, with the businesses and with the law firm, as well as with the businesses I ran and started up, I always wait too long to bring people on because I think I can get it done, or I can get it done better, and all those things. And so I wait too long. And so I've had to step back and say, okay, I've got only so many hours in the day, only so many things I can do to overcome this weakness. I've got to bring people on so I can focus on what really helps the business most, that I can do, which other people can't do.
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen, to everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. From the doctor saving lives at your local hospital, to the war veteran down the street who risked his life for our freedom, to the police officers and the firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored: the entrepreneur, the creator, the producer. The ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what, I can fix that. I can help people. I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world. Others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks on the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews, and I'm here live on the line with Devin Miller. Devin, are you here?
I am here. Good to be on.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. And Devin's coming in from Utah. And for those of you who are following along, I am still stuck in Central Florida for our travels. So we're still stuck there for the whole coronavirus thing. But for those of you who don't know Devin's actually is interesting. We've never had anyone who talks about this stuff on the show before. So Devin Miller is the founder of Miller IP Law. And you are a patent attorney that lives in Utah, and you've worked for a large law firm helping Fortune 100 clients with their intellectual property, and you realized that there was not a good resource out there to help startups and small businesses, like me, understand intellectual property, including patents, trademarks, and copyrights. And that's sort of what brings you to what you're doing now, which is helping people, business owners like myself, understand that kind of stuff. So with that very brief introduction, why don't you tell us what you're known for? Right? What's your business like? Who do you serve? What is like the primary good or service you offer to the world, so to speak?
All right. Well, I think there's 5 or 6 questions in there, so I'll try and hit as many as I can. So as you mentioned, kind of in the intro, known for focusing on, we do primarily patents and trademarks, so helping people to prepare them, file them, and then prosecute them in front of the United States Patent and Trademark Office, or USPTO, in order to get protection for your business. And that's general. A lot of other law firms, do that, but where we try and focus, focusing on a lot of the startups and small businesses is really how we've kind of tried to set up more of our model of how we do things, and who we focus on, who our client is, or our perfect client, or our niche is. And kind of with that, we've done a couple of things. One is that we moved all to flat fee basis. So a lot of times the gripe with attorneys is more on, is almost an open check or a never-ending bill, right? You sign up, and then they send you billable hours, and then they send you more billable hours, and then you have a phone call for 5 minutes, and they round it up to a half an hour, and then you ask, or you send an email, and you get charged for an hour, and it's just kind of that open-ended thing. So one of the things we did when we were looking at small businesses is they have a fairly limited budget. They're not able to have just an open check. They don't have unlimited budgets, and to the contrary, startups and small businesses generally have more things to spend money on than they have money to spend. So they're fairly judicious. And so we're trying to say, okay, this is how much it costs. Governmental fees, our fees, everything included, makes it easy. And then the one other thing, and then I'll take a breath and see if you have any questions, is, we also set it up so one of the stumbling blocks is, with startups and small businesses, is even going into the attorney, because they don't know, hey, I don't want to go into an attorney to pay them a few $100s just for them to tell me that they can't help me or I don't need this or anything else. So we also set up that they can come into a free strategy session, or typically now with COVID over Zoom, that we can meet with them. We'll talk through, help them strategize what they need with their business, whether it's they need something today, they need something down the road, or they don't need anything, or what they need. And then I know I said the last thing, but I'll add one more thing. Is the other thing that I've done personally. So I kind of play both sides of the fence, in the sense that I've founded and been a patent attorney my whole career, but I've also, alongside of that, founded and grown several startups. So I've done several startups that have grown to 7- and 8-figure companies, and started from the ground up. So I also offer the perspective of, I'm not just coming at it from the legal perspective, but can also offer the business perspective. So that was a whole bunch of answers to a simple question, or a couple simple questions, but I'll take a breath there.
So I have a couple of questions that pop into my head immediately, just sort of like hearing all of that. And this is selfish on my part, but most of the people who either listen to the show, and a lot of my clients, myself included, are in the space where we are creating products, right? So we're creating online courses, or we're creating online services, or creating physical products that get sold. I actually have a physical product business, and I've worked with a couple of clients who have physical product businesses, and they create their own products that are either private labeled or they're custom made. And I don't think anyone that I know in the space has trademarks or anything like that to protect their products and stuff like that. And I'm curious, how big of a mistake is that? And what are your like thresholds you say when you've created a product or created a brand or created something where you need to, like, okay, at this point you should be talking to an intellectual patent attorney?
Yeah, so maybe what would be helpful for your audience, and just to get set as a baseline, is to kind of go over what are patents, trademarks, and copyrights, because those are kind of, if you look at intellectual property, those are the three things of areas that you typically protect. So patents go towards inventions, anything that has a functionality that works, and that can be everything from software to hardware to those type of things. But anything, and I do everything from wearables to drones to medical software to medical devices to, I've done boat anchors to all across the board. But anything that does something, that's going to be under patent. Trademarks are going to be under brands, and so anything that's associated with your brand. So if you think of Nike has their name Nike, they have their Nike swoosh, that's their brand. Apple has the logo of the apple as well as the name Apple, and that's their brand. Starbucks has the mermaid with the the mermaid on the cup, and that's their brand. But anything to do with brand, that's under trademarks. Copyrights are going to be more under creative. So if you think of books or pictures or videos or sculptures or something of those nature. So maybe with that as a baseline, each of the different areas kind of are different. So the first thing I'd probably start at is if you're figuring out what you need to figure out where the value of your business is at. So if you think of, okay, are we a brand company, meaning do we differentiate ourselves on a product or on an invention or something unique? You have the next iPhone that's better than everything else, and you're really a product-based company, then you focus on patents. And these aren't mutually exclusive, but if you're saying, now are we a brand company? Do we really have a big following? We provide great customer service, or everybody knows that we do a good job, or we have a good marketplace or established ourselves. If we're saying, okay, the values in brand, then that's the second, and vice versa. Creatives, you write a book, you do a movie, you do photography, something of that's a creative. So I think the first thing is to identify, which of those are the essential, which of those are the main asset of your business, or what's driving the value, and then you look at which ones to protect. As far as when to protect them, walking through those three. On patents, you're really going to look at, so you have a couple different things. Patents are first to file. So if you're to look at that, first person to file on an invention, the government presumes you're the first one to come up with it. So whoever files on it first is the presumed inventor of it. So the one thing you always have to think of is, if I'm putting this out in the public, if others can see it, if others are using it, or if I'm doing, anything else, or it's a crowded space and a lot of people are inventing in this area, anytime you put it out there, you increase your risk. And if somebody files on it first, or someone, has a patent on it first, you can be boxed out of using your own product. And on the other one to think on patents is, anytime you put things out into the public, there's a statute that basically says you have a year time frame from the earliest time you put your invention out in the public, within which you have to file a patent on it. If you don't, then you're not able to. You're putting it out as a public product, public domain, anybody can use it. So those are kind of the two main things I always look at as far as an invention. Is risk is one is, if I'm putting this out there, how crowded is it? How quickly will people find out about it? And I'll probably want to do it before I increase that risk too much or expose it too far, and certainly before that 1 year time frame. Brands are a bit different on trademarks. So trademarks, you're going to go that one. There isn't a window. So trademarks are also kind of the first to file system, meaning there's some common law rights, some state law rights that you can keep in your defined small geographic area as soon as you start using it. But if you're saying, hey, we want to grow into multiple states, or we want to go across the US, or we're selling online or anything of that, really whoever files on the trademark first is the one that gets it. So if you're a small business or a startup and you're saying, hey, when do I want to go after, or when do I want to protect this? It's really, when do I get to the point that I want, or my brand is big enough that it's creating value that I'm going to need to make sure that somebody else doesn't get the name. The other hard thing is that you want to make sure your name is clear. So you don't put in a year or 2 or 3 of building a business with a rounded brand and a name and a company, only to find out somebody else has already trademarked it. And then you have to try and go and rebrand or go and get a license from them or do something much more expensive. And copyrights are the easiest, because those ones, and as soon as you create whatever it is that you're copywriting, whether it's take the photo, you write the book, you do the video or whatever, then you automatically have copyrights. The only reason you register a copyright is to define the date by which you came up with it. So if you take good notes or you can otherwise prove it, then copyrights are probably the least amount of urgency, because they already have those inherent rights. But if you're saying, hey, what I don't want to have happen is somebody comes along after, copies me or otherwise, and I can't establish when I actually created this, then you'll just want to be able to establish that date. So that was a much longer answer than I'm sure that was intended with the question, but that maybe gives.
No, that was actually, that's a really good answer. So I have one sort of like point of clarification that I'm just curious about, because I've always wondered this with the whole like name thing, right? So like, just as a for instance, we've been talking about this on the show a little bit. I've got a new service that's coming out called Push Button Podcasts, and we have like the logo, and we have the domain name, we have the website up, and we have like most of the services ready to go on the back end, and like we've got a custom app that we're working on developing, and just sort of like going through that kind of stuff. So the app and like the custom stuff that we're doing on the back end, that would be, because some of that is like we've invented some processes and whatnot in the software that would be patentable. Is that correct?
Yeah. So two avenues. So copyright, exactly the source code. So the source code that you typed up, you actually created. If you get down to that level of the app, that falls under copyrights. But it's pretty easy to design around source code. Somebody can code the same thing a different way, and then they get around your copyright. So really, it does fall under a patent application. And what you really look at is what, with the app, or if you're coming up with some new, is what is the new or unique things that you're coming up with? Because patents, you basically have 2 standards that they compare you against for patentability, and one that's called novelty and one that's called obviousness. Novelty is, has anybody else previously created it? If so, you can't patent it. Somebody else sort of came up with it. Obviousness is, okay, you didn't, not one person has created this, but if you were to take 2 or more things that are out there, it would have been obvious in somebody in that industry that you could have combined it. You're really not adding anything new or unique. You're just kind of combining 2 things that have already been out there, and then, that's not patentable. So if you can meet those 2 standards, then yeah, software and apps, and I do that on a frequent basis. Previous in my career, I worked with an Intel, I worked with a Red Hat, I worked with an Amazon, all of which have those type of products, and they are very heavy in those fields. And so, yeah, certainly something that would fall under patents.
So you could potentially, depending on what the software does, patent it, and then the trademark would cover things like the brand name and the domain name and like your logo and that kind of stuff.
Yep. So patents would be on the actual software, how it functions, how it works, the features that it has, and then just to your point, trademark would be okay. You think of Apple, and let's take an Apple as everybody knows Apple, but you think their phone is going to be patented, all of the features of how it works, the cameras, the screens, the touch screen, the battery life, and all those, and then their brand is Apple, right, or iPhone, and so that's what they trademark. So they trademark the Apple logo, they may trademark a product name and the business name. So yeah, just to your point, those would be kind of the two things that would fall under.
Nice. And then like to continue that example, the copywriting on the page, to sell the iPhone, that would be under copyright.
Yep, exactly. So if you take, or their
right, and the images to market it.
Yep, or their commercials, or their stands that you always see that it's pretty pictures that make the iPhone look great and everything else. Those are all going to be under copyrights.
Interesting. Yeah, it's really cool to sort of like have an idea of like how the hierarchy works, and like so where it fits in. So my next question for you then actually is more about you personally. We talk on this show all the time about the origin story, right? So every good comic book hero has an origin story. It's the thing that made them the hero they are today, and we want to sort of hear that story. Were you a born hero, or bit by a radioactive spider that made you want to get into business, right? So how did you get started on your own entrepreneur journey?
As most good origin stories, it has lots of twists and turns in it. So I've always liked. That almost takes me back to probably undergraduate school. So I'll start there, but I won't walk you through all of the details of it. But I was an undergraduate. I did a dual degree in Chinese or Mandarin Chinese and electrical engineering, and I got to kind of at the end of engineering, and I decided I didn't want to be an engineer. Not that I didn't enjoy engineering, but it was more of I didn't want to be stuck on a project every day, all day for a long period of time, for months or years on end, and be a very small cog in a big wheel type of a thing. And, and by all means, there are a lot of great engineers. They absolutely need it. But it's for me, my personality, I didn't quite want to do that. So I got to the end of engineering and said, okay, I still enjoy engineering, working on technology, still want to be there. But what do I want to do for my career? And so I kind of had a fork in the road. I enjoyed business. I enjoyed kind of startups and kind of that realm. And I also enjoyed more of engineering and technology and working on it. And so, when I went to it, I kind of split my path of I wanted to do business, and I wanted to do what was legal or a patent attorney. So kind of with that, I ended up taking both. So I went out to Cleveland, Ohio, and I did Case Western Reserve. I did a MBA, a Master's of Business Administration, and a law degree at the same time. So I ran those in parallel and got both of those degrees. With all of that, so all at the same time as I'm doing both of those degrees, I entered into a business competition with a few other people, and it's kind of one of those multidisciplinary business competitions, right? Where they get engineers, they had a designer, they had me as legal, they had a couple different types of engineers. One was more on the physical side, and then one on the electrical side. We all got together and we entered in a business competition, and we took second. And it was the first one was more on, we were trying to make gym bags not stinking without going into all of the details. It was kind of using a shark skin designed with how it's manufactured that would reduce the smell of gym bags. Took second. That was the end of it. Next year we came back and we entered in the competition. We were trying to come up with the idea of what we wanted to enter in, and we entered in, we had a few ideas that didn't really work, or we tried to hone down on. But as I was walking home one day from the competition, and at that time, and I still do it fairly frequently, I like to jog, I like to run, and I've just done my first marathon. And I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be? And my first marathon was horrible. I didn't drink enough. I didn't prepare well enough. I finished and it was fine, but it was much more painful than it had to be. And so I kind of thought to myself, wouldn't it have been cool if I would have had a kind of a hydration wearable that could help me to monitor my hydration? Because that's one of the big things that, as you get dehydrated, it makes it a lot more painful and a lot less fun experiences. Walking home, I came up with that idea. A long story short, so we entered that in the business competition. Again, took second place. And again, that was a little bit bittersweet, but that's a longer story for another time. But took second. And so with all of that, I bought out my partners, moved back to Utah as I graduated, and I kind of still had that fork in the road. Do I want to do business? Because I had bought out my partners and I have this business. I also have my law degree and enjoy doing patents. And so really, I've run both of those in parallel. I've continued to do startups and small businesses for part of my career, part of my time, and I also do Miller IP law and patents and trademarks. So I kind of work in startups and small businesses and also help them. So I don't know if that was what you're asking for, or if that was a long origin story about Right, but that's kind of the origin story where I got to here.
I'm curious if any of the businesses that you entered in the competition went anywhere further than the competition, if you actually went to market and actually started selling.
So yeah, so the gym bag, that one died on the vine after the first year we put it in. We had fizzled out and we didn't do anything on the wearables. So yeah, so I bought out, if that's or building on that story, I bought out my all the part people that worked on it with it, so I had a clear path of ownership. And then with that, um, I we built it. So we built it to a level and we bootstrapped it, and we got to a point that we needed investor dollars to move forward. So we got a kind of a first round, or what's a lot of times called a seed round of investor dollars. They came in, we were pushing it forward. As we were getting ready to do kind of the next, so we got a prototype, it was working, it was functional, and we're getting ready to kind of take the next level, which is getting it ready to put out in the marketplace. Difference between functioning something that looks horrible and nobody's ever going to want to buy because it doesn't have a good appeal, versus making it polished for a consumer product. We were about at that point, and as we were getting to that point, looking for kind of investors, and that we had an opportunity. A different company came along that was in the wearables, but for diabetes monitoring. So a lot of the technologies we had developed, we're coming up with, worked very well with what they're doing. So we actually licensed and got together with them. And so that one's actually ongoing, and currently they should be releasing product towards the end of this year, but for wearables for diabetes monitoring. So in the iteration, that one's still live, and I'm still actively involved on that business of for getting ready to launch that diabetes monitoring, while also doing Miller IP law and running the law firm.
Interesting. So you've got your hands in law firm, you've got your hands in inventions, and you've got your hands in startups. You got your hands in all sorts of fun things.
I enjoy it. I don't know if it maybe doesn't work for anybody else or split attention, but it certainly makes for a fun time, and it's something that I enjoy.
Awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about your superpowers then, right? So every iconic hero has superpower, whether that's, a fancy flying suit made by a genius intellect. Sounds like you might actually be on that path. Or the ability to call down thunder from sky, or maybe it's even super strength. In the real world, we say that heroes have what I call a zone of genius, right? It's a skill or a set of skills that you were born with or developed over time that really energize all of your other skills, right? This superpower is what sets you apart and allows you to help people slay their villains, so to speak, and come out on top in their own journeys. So what is your superpower with that sort of framing?
Oh, that one's a good. I would put it as, maybe I have a few superpowers. Superpowers make it sound like I'm way awesome, which I'm hesitant to say I'm way awesome, but we'll take the context of the question. So I'm going to split it. So one is, I think I have an ability to juggle a lot of different things, right? So I can, as you mentioned, so I got my hands in Miller IP law, very active, work with a lot of clients, help them with their patents and trademarks. But then I can just as readily jump over and then start, when I have, or putting time on the startup and small businesses, to put time on that. And I'll jump on the bench and do engineering and do that. And then I have to wear another hat of doing marketing and sales and making sure that that's all. So it's kind of that ability to multitask, and I don't know if that's intellect or just sheer ability or learned ability or whatever, but to be able to multitask is probably one. The other one that I'd probably say is, or two more, and I don't know how many I have, but another one is the ability to break down things and explain it more easily, right? So at least, when you're trying to, especially when you get into legal, you get into law, one of the hard things is you sit down with an attorney and they don't necessarily, they know the law very well, and that you walk in and you walk out and you don't understand the law any better than when you walked in, other than that you're poor and they told you to do a couple things and you hope that it works out. But the ability to actually sit down and teach someone and explain it, break it down on an understandable level, is something that I think is oftentimes not done very well, but one that I think that I do well. And then the third one is probably more just on the kind of customer service side of being able to relate to people, to be responsive. So if I were to stay within the legal field, a superpower, so legal field in general has horrible customer service. So generally, if you reach out to an attorney on average throughout the industry, it takes, doesn't matter if it's a text, a phone call, an email, or whatever, any sort of communication takes them 3 to 5 days to respond back to you. And with anything, with giving you a call back, shooting you an email, or anything. And if you're to take that, that's a ton of time, especially in legal matters. You're sitting there waiting. What am I paying him for? Why am I waiting? What's going on? And, these are things you want to know. So my superpower, I guess, is that you would say that, I always reach out same day, usually within the same hour, or, right off the bat, if they give me a call or shoot me an email or anything else, respond right away. But, I always, without fail, and maybe I'm sure there's some time I failed, always respond within the same day so that they're not waiting for forever. So if I were to say it, I guess it's superpowers I'd put is wearing multiple hats, being able to jump between things, being able to break things down to a simple level, and also having awesome customer service.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually think the first two probably fit together. They're probably the same sides of the same skill set, where I call it the ability to put cookies on the lower shelf. Right? You really understand complex systems well, and being able to understand complex systems and put them on the lower shelf for people who don't see the whole system or don't understand all the complexities, that you can make that simple for them, which gives you the ability to pick up new skills, right? Where you can go in and you can learn marketing, and you can learn engineering, and you can learn patent law, and you can learn a lot of different skills because you can see the complex systems and sort of understand them. So anyways, I think it's definitely a potent skill for someone who likes to put their hands in a lot of jars.
I like how you explained it much better than I did. So that's an awesome explanation.
Awesome. So the flip side then, of course, of your superpower is your fatal flaw, right? And every Superman has his kryptonite. Wonder Woman can't remove her bracelets of victory without going mad. You probably have a flaw that's held you back in your business, something that you struggled with. Maybe it's perfectionism, like me, that keeps you from shipping, or lack of self-care that means you let clients walk all over you, or maybe it's something like being a visionary but lacking the discipline to implement. That's something I struggled with for a long time. But more important than the flaw is the rectification. How did you fix it, right? How do you work to overcome that flaw so you can continue to grow? And hopefully sharing that will help our listeners, who might struggle with the same thing.
Yeah, so I'll give 2 fatal flaws at least come to mind. So, and they kind of hit same heads of the same coin, but one is that I like to micromanage things. It's not that I love to micromanage for the sake of micromanaging, but it's kind of probably something that a lot of people that do startups and small businesses struggle with. Is you always think you can do everything the best, right? So I know how to do it. I've done it before. I can do it the best. And if I have somebody else do it, it probably won't get done as well as I can do it. And it's going to take me longer to train them or show them how to do it than I could just do it myself. So I always kind of keep pushing it out there of, I'll just get it taken care of and I'll get it done. And then, a couple things happen. Either things never quite get done because I have too many things to get done, or I work a billion hours and I never see my wife and kids, which is also not good on life either. And so I think that's one thing that I've had to figure out is, a little bit I take that, somebody can do it 80% as good as I can, even if I can. And I can't always do it as well, even though I think I can. So realizing that some people are better at things than I am and they can figure it out. But even if I can do it, and if I were to do it better myself, if somebody can do it 80% as good as I can, that's good enough. Meaning that it offloads and it gives me the ability to have time to do the things that they can't do, or that are my strengths, and it frees up my time to focus on those. And so one of the things that I've struggled, weaknesses is trying to figure out how to bring people on that, I guess as I bring people on, giving them enough ability to offload those things is one that I've struggled with. And one that I just kind of had to come to a realization, accepting kind of that, 20-80 rule of if they can do 20, or if they can't do that 20%, but they can get 80%, it's good enough. And that was kind of dovetailing into that. The weakness building on top of that is waiting too long to hire people to get things done, right? So kind of because I always wanted to do it myself, or thought I could do it myself and had enough hours and could get it all done, I didn't with the businesses and with the law firm, as well as with the businesses I ran and started up, is I always wait too long to bring people on because I think I can get it done, or I can get it done better, and all those things. And so I wait too long. And so I've had to step back and say, okay, I've got only so many hours in the day, only so many things I can do to overcome this weakness. I've got to bring people on so I can focus on what really helps the business most, that I can do, which other people can't do.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I actually struggled with the same thing for a long time, particularly the I can do it myself better than anyone else can. And I realized like the solution for me was to change the question I was asking myself. So hopefully this is beneficial for you. But one of the things that I was doing is I would have a task come to my plate, like I need to get this thing done. And the question I was asking myself is, should I hire someone else to do this or should I do it myself?
Mm.
Right? And that question is really easy to answer. And it's always I should do it myself because I can do it better and I can do it cheaper and I can do it faster than if I hire someone else. So what I found out is that's a poor question to ask because it always leads to me doing the work.
Yep.
And so I had to shift the question. And so one of the things that I did was I was encouraged to do this by one of my mentors. He was like, just go out and hire someone, right?
Mm.
And even if it's for unspecified things, and hire them full time or part time or whatever. And then now your question at the beginning of the day is, what do I have on my plate that I can give them?
Mm.
Right? And that changed the conversation completely. And it did a couple of things. One, now I was asking that question and working on filling up someone else's time. I had a lot more free time, and then I could start working on things that I was, actually really good at. And then I found out that a lot of things that I thought I was great at, other people are better at than me.
Mm.
So it was a double-edged sword, but it also led to I've hired 3 people now in our company, and it's been a huge boon for actually just shifting that question.
Yeah, I'd parallel that, or I'd be in the same boat. So I mean, I don't know that you ever overcome a weakness completely, but you can at least minimize the effects, right? So,
Hmm.
so I've hired on a few people, and what I found is sometimes I think, and I still think I can do it better than other people, but I found that as I've been able to offload it, that we've been able to grow as a business, we're able to bring on more clients, we've been able to better service them, and it's one where it was holding the business back because I thought I could do it myself. So I think to your point, I've hired them on, and it's always interesting as I've hired them on. There's always more. Then there's always more things that I can have them do than they always have time to do, and I keep having to replicate bringing them on. But it's interesting how many things I wasn't getting to that I thought that I should things I should have been getting to that I wasn't because I was doing those other things. That now because I'm able to get to those, it's been helpful and been growing the business.
Yeah, that's it's so true because like one of my realizations was like now suddenly instead of having my for instance 40 hours that I want to put into work this week, now I've got 80 hours of work that's getting done, and it's like that's crazy. And you hire 3 or 4 more people, and you're like, especially when you get to the point where you're like I can spend an hour getting like assignments put out, and then have 10, 20, 30 hours of work get accomplished. That's a crazy cool place to be in business. And it's funny because startups and other businesses that are big and do a lot of things and have a lot of employees understand that already, but for those of us who start with that whole bootstrap do it all ourselves kind of mentality, it's a huge win to sort of figure out how to hire people and how to actually leverage your time that way.
Yep. No, I completely agree.
Awesome. So my next question then is about your common enemy, right? So every superhero has an arch nemesis, so to speak, a thing that they constantly have to fight against in their world, right? So in the world of business, this takes on a lot of forms, but generally speaking, we put it in the context of your clients, right? So what is a mindset or a flaw that you're constantly having to fight to overcome so that you can get your clients better, cheaper, faster, and or a higher degree of results? Something that you're sort of like, banging your head against the wall all the time, wishing you could wave your magic wand and get rid of this when you're working with clients. What is that thing for you?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll give you two. One, and the solution is one that we're actively actually working on. So we haven't fully implemented it yet. So you get a little bit of insight to maybe what we're working on. But one of the things that the common enemy that we're looking at is people want to do DIY. It's kind of we've grown up in a DIY culture, especially with videos on YouTube,
Yeah.
and be able to do things myself. And I have the internet and I can figure it out, and I can do as good of a job and all of those things. And some
And
things you
legal
can't
Zoom now and stuff like
legal
that.
Zoom. And so, and LegalZoom's a good example as well. And, and so you fight against, well, why would I hire an attorney, or why would I hire somebody else that when I can just DIY and do it myself? And sometimes I'll give the answer, yeah, you can DIY it and you can do it. And here are the drawbacks. If you do it yourself, you may do it wrong. And a lot of times we have people that do it wrong, and then they come in and we end up spending more time and money if we can fix it. And half the time, sometimes we can't even fix it, but when we can, then it takes more time and effort. But you're kind of common enemy is people thinking that they can do it DIY, do it wrong, do it better, do it themselves. But I get it in the sense that there's also startups, and again, we kind of almost go into the back or to the beginning of the podcast, is that you only have so much time, money, and effort, and money is one of them. And if you don't have enough money to hire an attorney, you'd rather get it done or have something in place and have nothing, and so you can do the DIY.
Yeah.
So, and you didn't necessarily ask the question, but the way that we've kind of fought that common enemy, if you want to put in that context, is we're in the process of rolling out what would be a DIY course, which I would still recommend that they use our services, that they use an attorney, and there's a lot better, it gets better done. But if people are going to be doing DIY stuff themselves, if they're going to be doing what would be a legal Zoom or anything else out there, why wouldn't we offer a course, at least for that portion of the population that's going to DIY, that we can help them do it better, so that they can avoid a lot of the things that people avoid when they have those, when they do it wrong or when they don't know what they're doing and everything else. So we've actually been working on, and we're rolling out a course in the next few months that helps people to do DIY better. And then it also gives them the option at any point along or at the end, they can say, okay, yeah, this is a lot harder. This is a lot of things I didn't understand, or it doesn't make sense, or I don't want to do it anymore. And then they can have us pick it up at any point. So it kind of helps to fight that, allows people to do DIY and aid them, as well as if they get into it and say, okay, DIY is not a good idea, that we can help them out to that point.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if you don't mind, I'm going to put on my course creator hat, because that's the thing that I do a lot with my clients, is help them to build and develop courses. And one of the things that we do for that transition at the end, where you get to the end of the course, like, hey, now you have accomplished this thing, right? You've learned how to, DIY your patents or whatever. I always tell my course creators at the end, the last thing that you want to do is you want to do a call to adventure. And the call to adventure for your course is it's two things. One of them is to drive home the idea that they need to take action. So we do have you do like a case study or something like that, and that's we're just showing some details on how it's done or whatnot. But more importantly, I think, is inviting them to the next stage of their journey. Right. So anytime you educate someone on how to do something, you've solved the problem for them, and you introduce a higher level of problem. So, for instance, I always tell people, if you win the lottery, before you won the lottery, you might have had money problems. After you won the lottery, you have money management problems. Right. So you didn't get rid of the problems; you just changed their degree, and so you have a higher level of problem. And so before the course, they don't know how to do patent work or whatever it is you're teaching them how to DIY. At the end of the course, now they know, but now that comes with a new set of problems. So you make the offer in light of that, right? Like, here's where you are on the journey. Like, you've gotten to this point, you've solved these problems. Here's what the rest of your road looks like, right? Yeah. The rest of your road looks like, okay, now you're going to do these things. You're going to file this stuff. You're going to take these actions. Here's the roadblocks that you're going to run into. Here's the shit that's going to go wrong. Here's all the things. Like, you act like a guide for what their journey is going to look like. And then you say, good news, we actually offer tour guide services. If you want help along this journey, that's where we come in, right? And you can frame it that way. It works really, really well for taking a course and driving it into either service delivery or masterminds or other things like that. And my encouragement is to build a video like that, where you're actually doing the education, like it's part of the education. Because part of the education is, hey, you're here, and here's what the rest of your journey looks like, and you actually map it out and show them what the rest of their journey looks like. And then the end of that video is your offer to help them do that, and make that the last module of your course.
Yeah, and you're hitting on a lot of the things that we're trying to build in, and I, by all means, you give a lot of good knowledge, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, what I call it is the inventive journey, right? Which, or at least in mine, which is, if you're to take a startup, you start at the idea stage. Patents are about halfway through, or trademarks are about halfway through. So what are the things that we can help them along earlier in their journey, and what we can help them along after we do the patents or the trademarks along their journey, and whether that's providing education, providing information, some of the things we can provide services for. And I think it also helps kind of a two ends, right? One is that it helps them because the problem with, especially when you get to patents and trademarks, is that you get the idea that, I do this one sliver, and then they go off, and you don't hear, that they kind of completed. They're no longer a repeat customer. They're no longer repeat business until they need the next patent or trademark. And so that can be, 6 months or a year, however period of time. And so now you're saying, well, yeah, but what would I think beneficial when we're trying to morph the company or grow the company into is saying, what are the services that we can add before this that we can help capture them earlier in their journey to help them both along the way and make them, help them to be loyal as us as clients and make sure that they educate them. And what are those points along after the journey that we can also help them with? So I'm in complete agreement, and then figuring out how to do that so you can provide more value and also capture more value.
Absolutely, that's the way we structure all of our clients' education businesses, is looking at the whole customer journey and how can you fit into the different parts of their journey. So, the flip side then, of course, of your common enemy is your driving force, right? And just like Spider-Man fights to save New York, or Batman fights to save Gotham, or Google fights to index and categorize all the world's information, what is it that you guys fight for at Miller IP? You have a mission, basically. We want to know what it is.
Yeah, so and we kind of touched on it before, and it really is the helping the startups and the small businesses. So that kind of, what is the common driving forces? I worked for a period of time during my career at major law firms, so top 100 law firms in the nation. I helped with all the biggest customers, biggest clients. And, it was fun. And for a while, I was a very small cog and a very big wheel. And the things I worked on are very incremental, very small. But, working with startups and small businesses is really a passion. But what the common cause is that, that's one that we can pull kind of our clients are pulling in the same direction as they are. They need this. They want this. They need the education. They need the ability to understand what they're doing. They need the good customer service. And that's where we set it up to provide is let's now focus on what would be an underserved community within the business community of startups and small businesses. And too often, once you can make it big, once you have lots of money, everybody wants wants to be your friend and everybody wants to use your business. But when you're still small and growing, oftentimes you can kind of feel like you're alone or that there isn't anybody else in that community. So what we're doing with the common cause and trying to everybody get, rally around is to create that community that helps a startup, that helps a small business, that educates them, that brings them up and guides them along that path. And that's where we focus on a lot of the different ways we structure things.
Awesome. So it just sort of popped into my head, but we were talking about community for small businesses, and that's a lot of the people that I work with on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And the three that pop up all the time, and I'm not sure if you're already considering this, but I need recommendations for this, is patent and intellectual attorney, like law, that kind of stuff. And then your legal structure type stuff, like S Corp, LLC, that kind of stuff. And then accounting, right? Like, what do I need to do, for my accounting? Do I need to have a separate checking account for my thing, or can I put it into my regular checking account until I get to a certain time? And all the basic accounting things that someone who's getting into the business or getting their business started, not knowing those things, those are the recommendations that always pop up. Like, hey, do you have someone you can recommend in this place, in those spaces? And that might be, if you're talking about building a community for the small business thing, those are the questions I get asked all the time.
Yeah. No, I'm in agreement. And those are hard, some of those we have people that we have connection with to refer them out, because I honestly don't want to get into accounting, and I don't. That's always the guy I always hate. We
accounting makes you want to pull your hair out, but
managing payroll and expenses and taxes and accounting and everything else, you have to do it as a small business. But yeah, we've looked at that and how to partner with that. One of the fourth question I almost put in, if you get into products more, is, how do I make a prototype, or how do I get things going, or how do I get started? And that's a little bit earlier in the journey. And that's one we've also looked at, is how we actually, with one of the business I have some 3D printing capabilities. We have a graphic designer, a modeler, and other people. So we actually looked at how we can help build that journey. But yeah, I agree that those are things that oftentimes come up that are the pain points that people don't know, that you can add a lot of value along the road.
So just another random selfish question here, because I've always wondered how this happens, and I've never been in the inventor space. But when you have an idea that you want to get done and you don't have engineering skills, how do you go from idea to prototype if you're not an engineer? Is that can you hire people, contract to do engineering work? Is that a thing?
Yes. There's a lot of snake oil in that business. And so where you get, and I'm not going to name names and call people out, but you'll get a lot of businesses that are kind of, we'll help you invent this, or we'll help you create this. And you'll get people that, because they don't know engineering, because they don't know product development, that they'll come in and they'll get either a subpar service. They'll get things that don't get done right, or they'll take their money and not do really anything. And so there are good people out there that absolutely offer those services, that you can either go in and they can do it all for you. and they do it well. But I'd say there's a lot more snake oil than good. But I think what you need to do is, a lot of times where I find is, let's say you have a really good idea, you're on the sales, you're on the marketing side, or you're on the product development side, or sometimes I'll call them the big idea person, where you come up with it and then you're looking for an implementer. Oftentimes what's better is to find someone else that is either a partner that wants to partner in the business, that wants to come in, that you can hire, but actually has some skin in the game that can help you navigate through that, and then they can help you do that. So yes, there are people that do that, and I could I recommend some that are good, a lot of them that aren't and that are bad. But I would say generally you're better to have someone that at least knows, even if they're not expert in it, knows some of the processing and help even select that, people that do the engineering for hire, that do the contract for hire, and go that route. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I was just sort of curious because I've had that question asked to me before. Like I have this idea, right? Like for instance, one of my clients is like, we want to get they want to get a lantern made, and they're like, do we just go to manufacturers and like give them drawings and maybe they'll come back with something? And I was like, I actually don't know how you do that. And so like and I had the same kind of questions myself. I'm like, hey, we got this idea for a product for an RV, and like it's a cool idea, but what do you do next?
I mean, where I'd
So
almost liken it to is the easiest one to think. If you've ever been through the home building process, first of all, it's a pain in the butt. But beyond that, it's
yeah.
you usually have what would be a general contractor, right, that manages everybody. That even if he doesn't do all the work, he knows kind of what is the parts and the pieces, how it all goes together, how to build a house, what order do you do the foundation before you do the framing, do you do the framing before you do the sheetrock, those type of things. And that's the kind of person that you really want, needing to either have as a mentor, have as an advisor, have as someone on your team, or make sure you find someone, if you're going to go outside of that, that you can really trust, that is taking that kind of the heart of the teacher, that's making sure you understand things along the way, that's letting you know how much things are going to cost, what to expect. And then you can absolutely, bring or do a product and bring that forward and make sure it's successful. But those are the kind of, you need to find who would be that general manager. And if you're that person, or you can at least, play that role, then you're great. If you're not that person, then finding that person to be on your team, or a mentor, an advisor, or someone that you can hire on is I think the best place to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds a lot like we talk in the app development space, right? Like having someone who knows how to speak both human and developer, right?
Yeah.
like you have to have that person who can translate what you want done into instructions to someone who can write code. Um, so you have to have that builder person who can speak both languages.
And I just laugh because a lot of the businesses and things I do are working with are app developers or software programmers, and it's absolutely right. There's almost two different languages, and you say, "Well, this is what I want," and then it doesn't translate over well, and you almost need that person that can do that translation and make it clear. So I just laugh because
and
someone
someone who can my brother is in machining. And he works with engineers all the time. And he says the funniest thing working with engineers that he has to deal with is engineers will design things without thinking about how they're going to get made. And he's the one who's doing the making. And so, like for instance, when you have a CNC machine, they are all spinning tools. So like internal corners can't be 90 degrees; they have to be rounded. Mm-hmm. And so they'll submit plans with 90-degree internal corners, and he'll send them back to the engineer and be like, "We can't do that." And they'll be like, "Why?" And be like physics. There's just stuff that we can't do. And like I'm working with the app development for the stuff we're doing, and it was like the same kind of thing. I'm like, I'm going to do this thing, and you have to have someone on the other side who's like, well, here's what we're capable of doing, right? Like what the capabilities are, and you have to fit your ideas inside of like real world limits.
And I even think sometimes it's not even that we can't do it; it's going to be so time cost prohibitive that while you could do it, it does not make sense to spend that much money and that much time and effort to do it, because your return is never going to be as good. Yeah, you could add this little feature on your app, and it's going to cost you $50,000 and add another 6 months to the project. We could do it, but it absolutely doesn't make sense for that little tiny feature. I think another thing.
Yeah.
It may not be done, or it's such a bad idea in the sense of how long it will take that it's not worthwhile.
Yeah, it's the same thing like my brother was saying with that internal 90-degree corner. He's like, we could do that, but we have to pull it off the machine and someone has to do it by hand. right? And if you want to do that for 2 million pieces, you're going to be paying a high dollar employee to build 2 million of these things. It's going to take you 4 years and eventually you'll get it done. Or you could just redesign that corner for us.
Exactly. Yep.
So anyways, so my next question for you then is more practical, right? We call this the hero's tool belt. And just like every superhero has a tool belt of awesome gadgets like batarangs and web slingers, we want to talk about top 1 or 2 tools that you couldn't live without in your business. Could be anything from your notepad to your calendar, to your marketing tools, to your product delivery, anything that you think is essential to getting your job done that you use sort of every day. Top 1 or 2 things. What would you say are some of your favorite tools to accomplish your work?
One that's maybe, I mean, it's intuitive and counterintuitive, I guess, at the same time, which I don't know how that works, but, is one that a tool that we use frequently that I didn't realize how critical or how well it would help our business was a simple CRM, or a customer relationship management system. And we don't necessarily, we use it for someone just that, but what we really use it for that has it built in is on a lot of automation, meaning one thing that, we always running out of time and ability to do things in the day. And we're also doing a lot of repetitive tasks. And whether it's letting clients know about something or giving them an update or sending out an invoice and following up with payment. And one of the biggest tools that we found out is, while there are places that we absolutely want to keep touch points on and do the human touch, and when we keep those for the things that we don't have to be able to have that that automation software in order to get those tasks done, get them done probably better, more timely manner, and also have a consistent answer is something that I think has been a very good tool in the toolbox that I ended up adding on later into the business and then have been made a huge difference. The other one, I'm trying to think, that would probably be the number one that comes up. I mean, the other one is, I think, just it's probably not as much of a tool, is, I guess the easy answer is certainly been Zoom. And Zoom, I was doing Zoom before Zoom was cool, in the sense that,
Yeah, us too.
much before COVID, but in the sense of being able to be available to a much wider audience is one that's really helped us as well, so that you're not having to come into our office. So with patents and trademarks, as opposed to other types of law that are state law, and you have to be at the, barred, you have or pass the bar within those states. For patents and trademarks, it's on the federal level. So you really can practice and help anybody within the 58 states of the U.S. And so one of the things we did is find tools, and Zoom is one, and we have a couple others that really allow us to reach that audience that's across all 50 states and across everybody, and it opens up a lot greater audience and an ability for them to meet with us. Last one and I guess I said two. I guess the third one is it's an easy service. It's called, and there's a lot of them out. We use the one that's called BombBomb, but there's a lot of ones out, and it's really just a video clip that makes it into a GIF or a GIF, depending on how you pronounce it, in an email. But then they can click on it, and they can then see you can leave them a little video. And so, kind of on that vein of reaching people out, if people aren't coming into the office, emails are oftentimes a lot too sterile. You never really establish a relationship. You never really talk with a person in face to face. And so it makes it hard to create that loyalty or that customer service. And so one thing we did is, by using that service, or, the kind of the video integrated into the email, is allows us to create that closeness, or that outreach, and get to know us, have something that's not just a sterile email that everybody doesn't read or they breeze through and everything else, but creates that something that'll actually get the information quicker and in a format that works for them.
Speaking of heroic tools, I want to take a few minutes to tell you about a tool we built that powers the Hero Show and is now this show's primary sponsor. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand, almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us, and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. You're listening to The Hero Show, unlocking the power of influence and success. Yeah. One of the apps I like for that is Bonjoro. And so it's a little app that goes on your phone, the same kind of thing. Like when someone does something, like sends you an email or sends you a text or subscribes to your list or buys something from you, you can have it pop into your Bonjoro as like a task, and you can create a video and click a button and it'll send it to them. So it's kind of a neat little, you can just turn it into like an automation for your thing. And yeah, it's really effective. And I totally get the CRM thing, right? For our business, it wasn't as much the CRM because of what we do. It was the project management, right? And figuring out like, how can we break out our projects and keep track of everything? Because we have fewer clients and more long-term projects. So it's less managing the clients and more managing their projects. And once we sort of had a system in place that really allowed us to keep track of our projects, it changed our business and allowed us to grow a lot. So
I agree, man. Lots of great tools in the tool belt that you can use, and those are some of the good ones.
Oh man, yeah, and it's funny too because like nowadays, I started like 12 or 15 years ago in business, and like none of these things existed. And nowadays, it's crazy what you can accomplish, for a couple $100 worth of tools. Talk to everyone in the world and manage projects like Fortune 500 companies.
Yep. So and it puts everybody. I think if you utilize the tools right, it puts you on an even playing field, right, or a better playing field.
Yeah.
You're not just. You're not handicapped by the size of your business as much, or by the location, or by the those things, and it makes it so you can compete on a better level.
Yeah, and then the other thing that's happening that helps with that is the market is more interested in interacting with individuals now than corporations, like individual faces. So the bigger companies are having to pivot to bring more person-to-person communication into their business, where like the smaller businesses are already in that spot, and the tools are they're having to use the same tools as the big businesses to do the same thing. So I actually think there's probably more advantage towards the small businesses nowadays because of that shift in the marketplace.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah. So almost last question here, your own personal heroes, right? Every hero has their mentors. Frodo had Gandalf, Luke had Obi-Wan, Robert Kiyosaki had his rich dad, and Spider-Man had his Uncle Ben. Who were some of your heroes? Were they real-life mentors, speakers, or authors, peers who were a couple of years ahead of you, and how important were they to what you've accomplished so far in your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, so few of them. One of them that's probably cliche, but is an honest answer, is my dad has been my hero. He he's been a kind of an entrepreneur since when I was growing up. That was really set a good example on a lot of things I ended up doing, and he still is one that I work with him side by side on a lot of projects. He's an engineer. We work hand in hand on a lot of things, and so he has certainly been a big mentor and a big hero and a big someone that I looked up to on that. One that I guess I don't know if it's controversial or not, is Rockefeller. Rockefeller, if you look back, was the founder of Standard Oil. So you go back several generations when oil was just getting refined, when it was just getting made. John Rockefeller, and he was also in Cleveland, which is where I went to school, which is all the better. But
Nice.
He was one that he created probably one of the big first monopolies in the U.S. Not that monopolies are good, but he was just one that he just grinded and built and outmaneuvered and outthought everybody, and is one of the mentors that I think it provides a lot of good ideas as to how you can do business and how you can outcompete and how you can grow and how you can not take no for an answer type of a thing. The last one I'd probably put is more on the financial side, which is, and probably one that people more recognize, is Dave Ramsey. And it's not, he does a lot of personal finance, but I've also taken a lot of those as to how we can run our business financially using a lot of the same models and the same characteristics is what you do on a lot of times personal finance. And, we talk about COVID and weathering the storms and how to do that, and how you have, an emergency fund, how you're able to have a budget, how you have money set aside for a rainy day, and a lot of those things. And that's been another one. So personal mentor, if you take somebody that I know personally, it would be my dad. Somebody from history would probably be John Rockefeller, and then someone that's more out there today would probably be Dave Ramsey.
So just off further question on that, do you have any recommendations for learning a bit about John Rockefeller?
I read a lot of books, and I point to him. Honestly, a lot of the books on him are fairly dry, so I don't know that I point that. But one of the best ones I actually like, there's a series or a mini series on the History Channel that's Men Who Built America, and they go through a few of the different ones. They go through Carnegie, they go through John Rockefeller, they hit into a little bit Edison and those other ones, but it really gives a pretty good insight for somebody that doesn't want to go through a long, or very thick books that oftentimes aren't as interesting. I think that one's a pretty good kind of introduction to him and a good mini series to find out more about him.
Awesome. So that's on the History Channel. That might be something I check out. So last question, your guiding principles. One of the things that makes heroes heroic is that they live by a code. For instance, Batman never kills his enemies. He just brings them to Arkham Asylum. So as we wrap up the interview and talk about top 1 or 2 principles that you use regularly in your life, maybe a principle you wish you knew when you first started out on your own hero's journey.
Yeah. Guiding principle, probably the one that I would do is probably give people the advice that I would want them to give me, or it's kind of the same thing as the golden rule, but where it really is putting myself in their shoes, so that I'm, rather than making it based on what is the best decision for the business, right? How can I make the most money? And so, that would often be telling people to do a patent and trademark every time. And sometimes it's good for them and sometimes it's not. And so one of the guiding principles I always said, rather than answer what will make the most money or what will be best for the business, in short term, is saying what will be best for the clients. If I were to put myself in their shoes, what would they want to know? And so that would be the principle that I always look at and say, if I was in their shoes, what would I want to know? What would be helpful for me if I was trying to make the decision like they are? And I think that one, if you do that, it helps the business, helps the client, helps them to grow, and then in turn makes them, as you help them, even if it's not the thing that creates the most value or the most money, income and cash flow at the forefront, it creates it in the long term. So that's probably, I guess, a principle that I would say.
Yeah, that's definitely taking the long game in your business and understanding that the short-term gains at the cost of client trust is not nearly as profitable over the long term. So anyways, yeah, I love that. And that's basically a wrap on our interview. I do finish every interview with a simple challenge called the Heroes Challenge. We do this to help us gain access to new stories, basically. But some question is simple. Do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine. And why do you think they should come share their story with us here on the Hero Show?
Other than myself, right?
Other than yourself, because you're already here. You shared your story.
That's right. Who would be a good person to share with their story? So there's a lot of cool people. I work with a lot of inventors, so I'm trying to think one would be the one, and the one that I don't know if they're available to even do it, but we'll put that aside for just a second. Was really cool was, the people that I find the coolest, and there's a person in particular that I've worked with, are the people that reinvent themselves a lot. And that, they're saying, I've got something in my life that's a business. So one that comes to mind is I have a client and her name is Karen. And, without getting into the full name or disclosing everything she does, yeah. She was at a point that she was like 55 or 60, and she was, she'd gone through a career, she'd gone through, a fairly I'd say mundane, but in a financial career, just doing, number crunching and all that. And she just kind of got tired of it and was saying, okay, I'm going to just completely flip. And so she came up with an invention for using in a dryer in order to remove pet hair that clings to your clothes by just simply putting a little sticky pad thing in your dryer in order to help remove it. But, regardless of the invention, what was cool is that just as she was saying, okay, I'm towards the end of my career, I could do this. I really don't want to. Let's chase the dream, do the thing that I want to do, and that will make me happy and that will make things productive. And then the story of actually switching completely to something new was one that I think makes for a cool journey.
That's really cool. Yeah. We'll see if we can reach out separately and maybe get Karen interested in coming on the show. And that's basically a wrap on the interview. So in comic books, there's always the crowd who says thank you for their acts of heroism and claps and cheers and thanks them for their work. So as we close, we're going to do something similar. And basically, where can people find you if they want to work with you or want to hire you, or go through the course that we talked about on here? Where can they find you? And then more importantly, who are the right types of people to actually reach out and say, hey, you know what, Devin, I really love to get your help on this kind of thing? Who are the right types of people to reach out?
Yeah, so easiest as everybody is always go to the website. You can always find out more, and that's at milleripl.com. So Miller, my last name, I as an intellectual, P as in property, L as in law.com. The other way, if they're wanting, so two more ways, and then I'll give it. One way is if they're ever wanting to have any specific questions on patents and trademarks. I mentioned we do free strategy sessions or free strategy meetings, so they can just go to freestrategymeeting.com. You can grab a half an hour of my time. We'll sit down, answer any of your questions, make sure you go through it, understand it, totally free of charge, and as a service to that. And then the last one is if you want to just grab some of my time, period, just want to talk, throw ideas off, have anything else, and you don't necessarily need a strategy session, then you can go to meetdevin.com. And that one's one where you can just grab some time on my calendar. So milleripl.com for the website to find out more, freestrategymeeting.com if you want to talk more about patents and trademarks and get questions answered. And for me personally, let's go to meetdevin.com.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure we get those links into the thing below. And like I said, we have a lot of people in the audience who are in this space. I would, if you are creating products specifically, I think a lot of particularly the brands that I work with would be served really well by getting their product names and their product courses probably trademarked and the brands and stuff trademarked. So I would encourage them to reach out and find out from Devin if it makes sense for that. And Devin, again, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience before I hit this stop record button?
Just work, or I think that be persistent. I think within all business and I work with a lot of startups and small business. I would say the common thing, the difference between failure and success is persistence, and whatever that realm or whatever you're doing is just to be persistent. And that's about all I have.
Yeah. Never, ever give up, right? I always tell people it's like the thing that causes failure more than anything else is giving up. So,
yep.
Agreed. Thank you very much for coming on, Devin.